Hello everyone, my name is Zsolt Misklósvölgyi. I am the editor of ACB Media podcast channel. Today we have the privilege of welcoming Selma Selman and Karol Radziszewski on this show. And the reason for that is that both of them has currently a show on view at ACB Gallery. Selma has a new show titled Fana. She will explain it what this means from Arabic. And Karol Radziszewski also has a solo show, first one in Hungary at the ACB Attachment, titled Sinners. Welcome both of you at the show. And the reason we were thinking perhaps it's nice to have a recorded session is to have a glimpse into what your exhibitions are about. And since we have coordinated that these two exhibitions happening at the same time, and it's also the first time you met in person, I wanted to take this opportunity to have a little discussion here. So I will start with Selma first. Welcome back. It's already the third podcast of yours on the ACB Media channel. And I was wondering, since the last time recording, you had so many amazing shows and international collaborations and presence. And finally, to conclude this year, you have a really nice solo show here at the ACB Gallery. So can you just very briefly explain for the audience what the title means and how this relates to your recent works?
Yeah, I mean, some of the works I made also from Art Basel, but some of them are pretty much new. So basically I combined what was left in order to create something new. And the concept actually came after, basically, because there was so much, I don't know, like even when you think about the world, what's happening today, I was thinking about myself and about my position and how do I try to detach myself from self. And this is why this title came, because I was thinking about annihilation of the self and the construction of ego, and I was really much interested in the Sufism. And I read like few poems of Rumi, and it was like really much inspiring for me to title the show Fana and to try to basically show how you as a person, as a human, can be reborn again. Like when you destroy everything within yourself, and most importantly the ego, then you can truly connect with yourself and know who are you as a person. And yesterday, during the opening, one of the collectors asked me an interesting question. He asked me like, I see your work, but at the same time I'm thinking like, do you actually, when you make a work, think of the space where you're going to exhibit this? Do you think how this work is going to look like in the apartment? And this is the first time that I started to think of that. I never saw my work as something that is going to be hanged in an apartment, because I'm so much, I would say, like stuck with making a work like from my gut, that I forgot to think about that my work also belongs to someone else. And I explained to him that I do not really care how my work is going to be hanged, like in apartments. That I'm more interested into this, what I just spoke about. And I think this is like just a beautiful moment with us. And somehow he understood this, and maybe this is why he put the work. Yeah.
And you, Karol, how much do you think about the potential afterlife of your artwork? Because one might say you operate with a certain kind of strategy that can be thought as very effective in terms of seducing first the viewer with this very energetic gestural painting of yours with these very vivid colors of the acrylic, and then it potentially inspires the people to delve deeper into the actual research it is actually surrounded by. How much you think about the potential afterlife of your paintings?
I actually I don't know if I think a lot about the afterlife in the private flats, but I think from the very beginning about how it will be installed and how the works will relate together. So a very site-specific way of thinking. Even if this show, The Sceners, it's, for me, this whole room is more like a site-specific installation than an exhibition of paintings, let's say. That's why the color of the floor is working. I saw many times my works in the collectors' houses. Always I'm surprised how they come up with the ideas, where it landed. But primary for me is more interesting when the institution could buy with the context, like this new show that I'm doing at Modernam set. This is the whole installation with the desk with archival material, and the paintings are not even real, they are reproductions as a part of the installation. And then it works. But the single portrait of particular person, when it's in the collector's house, I know it's working much stronger because I have a lot of feedback, like how they live with that and looking at this eyes of the portrait. So they fantasize it even more than I thought from the beginning. Yeah, so definitely this energy is coming. It's just very unexpected how you receive it from the people who have the work.
And can you please perhaps introduce a little bit more your concept of the research that is always aligns with the painting, how paintings and your Queer Archive Institute research are overlapping with each other, so that the people who are listening it from distance can also have a little bit of background info?
Yes, I always study painting. I'm a professional painter, but for me it was such a old school bourgeois medium that I thought, like, why to even paint on the canvas nowadays still? And so for many years I stopped doing this, and I focused more on film, installation, and just the process of researching. Also with the queer history, that wasn't and still is not much present in the narration, the history. I focus more on searching for the people who could tell something. So the stories were the most important for me. And then the medium wasn't that important. First is coming the story and the particular figure that I want to explore. I was working more and more with video and installations, and it was more Xerox, vitrines, growing collections. And then I realized that there are many people from the past, not only from the communist times that was occupying me at the beginning, but more like 19th century, even 17th century queer figure, from that sometimes you don't have even photo or just like a little drawing or some pixelated Wikipedia small image. And then I thought these portraits actually could bring them alive, and also they could be queer in a way that I'm, as a queer artist, creating those portraits. So that was the whole idea, to get back to painting. And then the idea, as an activist, I think I want to influence what will be in the books in the future, and I had hope that these portraits will end up in the kids and teenagers' books as reproductions of this particular people. And when I got to that point, I started to mixing the portraits with the archival material, and the stories started to circulate. And this exhibition here is a kind of it's a great example of how it's mixed together.
If I want to find, let's say, a notion that is somehow overbridges the two exhibitions, not the artistic positions in general, but nonetheless the exhibition, it is very interesting to see the self and the construction, but also the deconstruction of the self. Your exhibition was not only from the title, but even from the medium up to the key figures and motifs on the painting, very much focuses on that. And with Karol's exhibition, this is all about the struggle and the emancipatorial aims of these selves to finally find a way to authentically live kind of identity that has been oppressed for many years throughout various political regimes. I'm wondering if this idea or concept of the self and staging it or creating it, was it always for the both of you a central topic, that the artist, him or her or themselves, is what is also the medium or the raw material for the works, or is it also about decentering this kind of self-centered world through art? So that art is also about losing yourself and getting to somewhere else. So how these two are connected in your practice?
Yeah. As an artist, I always question everything what I do, but sometimes like even too much, and then I'm frustrated when I don't have the answer. But then I was thinking, what would happen with my art and with me if I would have the answer on all possible questions that I ask? and that people ask. And at that moment you realize that then maybe that means that art became boring for you, that there is nothing else that you can explore anymore. But for me personally, like every artwork that I make, idea or concept, it's coming from the inside out. I don't have anything against the people who are like commenting on the world today. I'm pretty much aware of what's happening, but I could never like react, to use like hot topic today, and then based on that I'm gonna make the work. All the work is coming from the inside. Somehow like I feel them, even though, as I said, I don't know why I'm making something, but I know down deep that that's the right thing to do, When I was a younger artist, I would say the construction of my personal history, identity as a Roma, as a woman, played a big role. But somehow I passed these topics of identity. I'm pretty much interested in beyond of who am I, and we can call this the construction of self.
For me, it's like when I come out and discover myself as a non-heterosexual man, most of my works were focusing on me, my family, religious beliefs and identity. And then also I realized that it's a trap that people expect that it will be about you, like a kind of a victim diary or, confession. So slowly, more and more, I was going through the research and bigger kind of narration around those topics. So this identity topic is still important for me, but I'm not that present. It's also about representing the whole community and how you can learn from other people. And by working on the archive and the past and meeting so many people, it becomes like a group self-portrait, if we want to go in that direction. But for this show that I'm showing at ACB, it's interesting for me that it's the first time that I'm getting more personal photography, more explicit. It's not presenting me, but my desires or my observations or my fears, and it's this not autobiographical, but very personal element is coming back for me in an unexpected way. But it wasn't planned, and it's part of the whole frame to present these stories of Hungarian queer history.
Last year, I think it was a year ago, it made a big sensation and a sort of a scandal in the international, let's say, art media. One text particularly from the British art critic Dean Kissick. I don't know if you have had the chance to read the Painted Protest. It was published by The Atlantic, and there Kissick suggests that today's art has been completely overtaken by this kind of a political agenda representation, and in this regard, many of today's artwork is boring and generic and just self-repeating because it has been hijacked or taken over by certain ideological agendas, and he's questioning where the more subversive, let's say, curiosity evaporated in from art. I don't know if you have this kind of frustration when it comes to contemporary art, when it's all over about the identity and it's all over this kind of agenda representation. Obviously, it's a two-sided question because you might want to also know from where these questions are arising. So certain, let's say, topics, whether if it's a queer emancipation or whether if it's females' position in the society. We are today talking here in Budapest, in Hungary. The political situation is terrible. The society is divided into two. There is a huge surface tension, tangible and visible, in the society. So obviously there are still so many things we have to strike for, we have to fight for. But at the same time, if you look the international context, you can see this kind of deflation of these subversive energies. So I'm wondering, because you are both artists who has luckily the privilege to travel to many places, to have a very strong international presence, and I'm always wondering how these, like the local from where you're from, and these kind of new worlds are perhaps sometimes colliding with. So what are your experiences with this very complex problem?
I mean, to be honest, great question. But at the same time, it's whatever we could answer, it's going to be absurd. because there is no answer to that. Maybe what we make now, the art that we create now, it's interesting, but maybe in 20 years it's going to be boring, then you become past. But that's what I say, you have to be and stay true to yourself, never losing yourself. I think that's the key point. But also, since I quite spend a lot of time in Berlin, I can see how art became dirty political and how much I don't see anymore, I would say in quotation, beauty in art, because I don't know, Berlin was supposed to be a city where you are supposed to say things without censorship, and now it's opposite. Every third German is a professional in anti-Semitism. Also, when I think of the US, so I'm talking about the countries or the cities where I am based. So I think US became absurd for art. I mean, it was always like that, but now even more. And then you have Holland, which has amazing financial backup for art, but it's completely boring. And then you have Bosnia, who has amazing artists, but not infrastructure to show these artists. So it is the apocalypse of humankind, and then you as an artist, you have to find a way out. And sometimes I'm thankful that I'm artist and that I'm paid for my own thoughts, because there is someone who's going to listen to me and trust me. And this is a big role to have, But I don't know if I answered your question. I think it's pretty much really heavy time to live in, And I was just recently thinking, there is a war. People are currently dying in Gaza, right? And I'm as a young woman, in my best possible age, I'm living in the time of wars and collapse, and it's so sad, extremely sad, and I still have to wake up and to find a purpose in life and to make sure that every day is a beautiful day, that I do something,
Wow, you said it so beautifully that it's hard to add something, but yeah, I totally relate. But that's also a crucial point, how to not become cynical. And in art, I see it a lot. And yeah, I relate also in the way that I feel only when you feel that it's something interesting for you, that you believe in your work, then it's could be interesting for others, but for sure you can continue without having this dark thoughts that you are just failing or not responding to what's happening in the world. For me, as a Polish artist exhibiting in Budapest, it could be with a queer topic. Many people would expect that it would be a radical political, but for them it would mean there would be a flags, slogans, and direct comments. I rather trying to, what we said at the beginning, seduce people and make them, oh, it's a nice paintings, colors, who are those people? And suddenly, oh my God, this whole histories have to be thought differently. These poets, writers. I never thought about this painting in the National Gallery in that way, and so on. My strategy is subversive, but in a deeper way and more personal. And I always have to have my own personal interest in that. So when I'm doing research, it's because I want to learn, not because I have to check the points on the list, what have to be done in that kind of a political situation. I never use the rainbow flag in my work, for example, and for many people it's weird, but I see so many art that it could be just an article, also research made in 7 days, being somewhere in some country, this is the moment what you mentioned, when it's maybe too many artists traveling just for projects, that they have to be dedicated to something. It's a bit artificial, more flat, and then probably will not stay longer.
Just epiphany. I was thinking recently about Henri Matisse and Renard. And just in some text, Renard says that the real poetry is written by poor people. So what does it mean? Sometimes, I don't know if you feel like that the best art or the best poems are written by those who are so poor and are read by those who are so rich. And this is a huge contrast between the two worlds. And I feel this is, even today, this is how it works. because the reality of life comes exactly from underprivileged positions, and they teach richness, aristocracy, bourgeois, to understand the pain of life. And this is in which world we are living, and I have to say that in a way I feel privileged to be an artist. I feel privileged that I can make these big projects now. When I was a kid, I couldn't, but now I feel this job is amazing. And yes, I'm stressful when when I do Art Basel, but nothing can be compared to this, what I experienced in my life, the brutality of reality, which cost me my traumatic experience, which now becomes my art. The more traumatic you are, the more hardship life you had, the better art is gonna be. In a way, it's use your trauma and make it into business. The more traumatic, the better sale. And then, I don't know, my first job was I was collecting scrap metal. I was selling carpets with my father. I never thought that someone would buy my piece of metal and put it on the wall, even though I knew I would be something big, but I didn't know exactly what. Yeah.
And what about sinners? Because what Selma very compellingly told about the poor's writing always the best poetry is something similar with the sinners on the periphery, on the margins, forced to live their secretive life of desire after the night starts only in the dark. So this title of your show, The Sinners, how this relates to this idea that Selma just explained?
I mean, it's quite simple. The sinners is like the name that gave for those people who don't fit to society, to the norms. And in a classical queer way, we are trying to get back the words, like word faggots. Queer have this root. So sinners were the same in that sense. And many of those who are represented in the show were considered bad people or not proper. And then they prove with the biographies, they work, that they are special, unique. I don't know if all of them were poor. One, Chandravai, was like a duke, but still this non-confirmed gender and playing with this makes his literature so interesting that it became a kind of a source of inspiration for others who were receiving this. Or the Petty, one of the figures who is contemporary, presented through the audio installation and the photographs. It's quite a good example that he's compromising with his life, his desires. He's talking about it very openly, without any shame. And that was, even for me, for the first moment was shocking, the level of details he's giving about his life. But then I was super impressed. And as an artist, I was having this feeling, oh my God, when I'm walking with him in the night through the park, how he's describing life, how he's navigating every day, is much more interesting, and that would definitely fit to this definition that Selma was just talking.
Yeah, just want to relate to this. I have two brothers. They're gay and they're married. They have husbands in Germany. They're pretty much happy. And back home, within the Roma community, they're very well accepted. We were never accepted as Roma people, in Bosnia, as people. We are always treated as second-level citizens. But my family, entire village, accepted that they're gay and that they're happy. And this was the most important. And they would relate to their husbands like friends. These are their friends. And this was pretty much, for me, fascinated when I see my other gay friends who struggled to say to their parents they're Bosnian or, Serbian. It's still stigma, to say, who are you? But I'm also thinking how during the older civilization, Maya and Incas, the most appreciated people were the ones who looked like women or men who looked like women. And they didn't make any difference. Or when we think about the oldest religions, in Buddhism, Shiva Shiva was like greatly appreciated because she had both genders, so we can say transgender. Only I would say with the French Revolution, like the things change, or like also with the Christianity, like the things started to shift. Even though, believe me, I'm 100% sure that bishops fucked each other, but still, like it was,
Or still fucking each other.
Or fucking boys, But I feel like, how comes that 1,000 years ago people had completely normal life? Doesn't matter, but now everything shifted and changed. And also, like, another epiphany, I don't know if you know this book by Thomas More, Utopia. It's pretty much, it's written 500 years ago. I mean, some parts are very racist, but there is a part where it's written like how people could live perfectly happy and how this island could become us, basically. But I guess because of the national identity, because like for people it's very important to know like your sexual life or whatever, what kind of color you are, I think we are still not going to change this. I mean, so it's sad.
This kind of identity problem is not only limited to the self, because obviously there are like larger, or it has different scales. So national identity is obviously a huge elephant in the room when we are talking about, and it's getting stronger and stronger once again. But at the same time, there are so many other, I would say, non-essentially ways to define yourself vis-a-vis this kind of, like global liberal cosmopolitism that still nowadays, are 100% prevalent and promoted through the media, promoted through the consumerist society, etc. So I'm wondering, these new kind of geographies or geocultural stories that in many regards shapes the focuses of both of your works, because one might say the categorization of Balkan or Southern Europe, or the whole complexity of the Roma identity, when it's also about Eastern European alternative queer histories. You are both in many regards dealing with the rewriting of a non-essentialist, perhaps alternative future story of a new, let's say, geocultural narrative. I'm wondering, in your most recent works, so also on a more practical note, can you please just share what are you cooking nowadays in the kitchen? What kind of shows you have on view, or what's the next big steps after the ACB show, so that the listeners can also have a little bit of an understanding how active both of you are in your career at this moment?
I'm like trying to remember what is next. I don't know. The only thing I know, I'm going for a vacation. I will be 1 month in Miami Beach, so I'm very much looking forward to that. But then like after, I am going to New York for this residency for 3 months, and I will focus on rewriting and editing Letters to Omer, that I can finally make my first book. And I hope I will find someone who will give me money to publish it. And also I want to make this vinyl that you can listen to it. So I'm very much excited about that. And then I'm preparing this big performance for the Lyon Biennale, but I think that's in September. And before that I have...
Catherine Nichols is the curator of the Lyon Biennale.
Catherine.
And the last show
you
were together.
Catherine.
So a shout out to Catherine.
Catherine is amazing. Yes, I don't know. I have some things. I have to paint.
And what other shows you have currently on view? If people are traveling abroad?
In Munich. One is in Munich, that's what I know. Another one, I don't know. I have no idea. They should check my social media. I can't remember, really.
And Karol?
Sorry. I don't know.
No, I'm preparing for solo show at Moderna Museet for the end of January in Stockholm, working with Henrik Folkers, who I know also work with your gallery and the artists who are here. So it's interesting for me because I think what we were discussing before about geography and identity, the Western institution, they're not necessarily that interested in Central Eastern Europe anymore, but only because this work is connected with the queer topic that becomes somehow more mainstream. I had to wait 2 decades for that. My installation, calling The Classroom, is summarizing the stories from the whole region. So I also trying to make a platform, and there will be extensive program of lectures and performances following the installation to bring people from ex-Yugoslavia, from Ljubljana, from Ukraine, to have a place to talk and represent their voices. And I'm always trying to shape bigger kind of scene that others could feed. So it's like a lot of preparations for that. And I didn't mention that for this show on ASCB, we are producing with Gyula Muskovic, the curator of the magazine, Dick magazine, that I'm running for 20 years. So it will be special issue about queer Budapest, that it's much more extensive than the exhibition, but it will be connected. And then for Moderna, there will be another issue about experimental queer education and aspects of learning differently.
Beautiful. Nice. I'm going to have my fundraiser from my foundation. So I have this foundation, it's called Get the Heck to School. So I'm giving scholarships for Roma girls in my village. And I also want to give like presents for the Christmas for the entire village. I mean, for the kids, and also to give at least 50 scholarships. I need money. So I'm going to sell 3 drawings and 1 big painting. Hopefully that everything goes in my fund, and we're gonna send a newsletter through my email so people can buy. So buy.
And if someone is interested more about the whole initiative, how would you find it easiest?
On my studio email, like Studio Selma Selman, or they can write to you, to the gallery. So yeah, that's how.
It's very interesting to see that since you mentioned, both of you, this kind of, let's say, the social mission that your art can potentially carry, but never burdened with this one and only singular job to deliver. But there is always this level of, let's say, attention and awareness through all these social issues. And what I really like in both of your art is that it is delivering the message. People can get it, but it's never confined into a preset, rules of how to understand. There's no singular understanding. There's always a multitude or a manifold that can be interpreted in. Obviously, if someone, for instance, in the current government representative afraid of Karol's show, I don't think there's any reason for that. You are not going to turn into gay, you're not turning children into a queer, through that. So it's not a propaganda machinery. Art is not about that. It's quite the contrary. It's about giving the freedom, providing a space for the multitude of potential understandings. This is how I wanted to conclude today's show, perhaps to have a commentary or ask a commentary of both of you, because this is a topic that nowadays not so much present in art speak. That is the ambivalence. How art has always should be ambivalent, and what does ambivalence means nowadays to you in art or perhaps beyond?
Yeah. Like there is one thing, art and the art world. I divide this. For me, art is created in my studio, me alone doing thinking. Art world is in a way business. It's the way how you're going to approach to the gallery, how you're going to speak to this, how you're going to do this. Museums, the same, But dividing it gives you the freedom to actually not collapse, basically. And another funny thing is that when we think about the art as a tool to change something, can art really change? Can we change the world? Basically, it's a little bit cliche to think in that way. But the problem is that as an artist, the art world expects you to change it, but at the same time, people believe art cannot change. So that's paradoxal. And this is how we, as an artist, exist. So something, I think, in a way, will change to prove that even if the art changes opinion of 1% of people, this is a change. And change can happen on the personal level. it can basically happen, like, for example, with my foundation, like in the village. You start slowly, and somewhere it's gonna be heard. Someone is gonna learn about that, and someone might change their mind or the vision, how they think. Simone de Beauvoir, I quote, "Her wings are cut, yet they expect her to fly." So I would say that I don't want to be in this position. This is why I'm like really careful with my wings. That's why I'm very careful with the girls that I'm working with, because I don't want them at the beginning of their early age that their wings are cut, that they can fly. Yeah, I would conclude on that.
It's funny because you said about politicians shouldn't be afraid of my show because it's only about freedom, and actually that's what they fear the most. And that's my kind of idea, not only through the exhibitions, but as an artist, also through social media and through just being myself and showing that you can be fully free and expressing yourself. It's for me enough to changing people and to giving the example. They don't have to use it, but you stand and giving the different vision of life or behavior or changing the rules, what is acceptable or not, especially when you are more established and have this privilege, as Selma said, of being an artist and earning money from your work. That paradox is giving me more confidence that I could use this money. Sometimes I'm selling something and then using this money for a project that nobody would give me money. And I'm not asking anyone. I'm not mentioning Polish government or even collectors. I decide how I spend this money, and that's also power, how I could influence things that are not just art, but working for society or for some particular projects. Also the magazine that I'm publishing, the idea is it's a magazine, not like an art book. It's because it's circulating and you can buy it in the bookstore and then you can read it at home and you don't even have to know that I'm an artist. It's just like a tool to reach more people outside of the bubble of the art world.
So I'll repeat also for the listeners that until 4th of December, Selman's current show at ACB Gallery titled Fana is on view, as well as Karol Radziszewski's show, first Hungarian solo show at ACB Attachment titled Sinners. So it is absolutely worth to check out both online and IRL. And I also would like to take the opportunity to say thank you for both Selma and Karol for joining for today's episode, and hopefully many more to come.
Yes, thank you so much for great questions, as always.